How can you support children that are more sensitive to sounds, emotions, food allergens, and environmental toxicants like EMFs or mold? You're listening to the 2025 EMF HAZARDS Summit. My name is Nick, the EMF Guy Pinot, and this is the EMF HAZARDS Summit, Protect Your Children. In this interview, Sharon Harmon, PhD, will arm us with tools and strategies to help kids that are most sensitive and vulnerable to environmental toxins. She empowers us to take charge of our kids' health. Sharon is a holistic health PhD who will learn later in life that she is what is considered a highly sensitive person. While this explained a lot about her life, she continued to look for alternative therapies that worked for her and her health challenges. Ultimately, this led her to the world of frequencies, learning how to reduce the negative ones and add more of the positive ones. Now Sharon works with other sensitive people, helping them understand their body from a different point of view so they feel better and learn how to turn their sensitivities into strengths. I'm here today with Sharon Harmon, PhD. How are you, Sharon?
Good, Nick. Thank you. Thank you.
You reached out to me. You had a very peculiar skill set that I very rarely hear about. You work with, and you, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you work with kids and parents to help kids that are on, let's say, a sensitive spectrum. Maybe we can start there. You know, we hear about electrosensitivity or sensitivity to chemicals or to mold. How do you define the fact that certain individuals are more, let's say, sensitive or reactive to certain things in our environment?
Good question. And I kind of figured this out all because of myself, what some people call a highly sensitive person. And so if something's going to happen, it'll happen to me first. I was aware of GMOs before GMO became a thing because I was getting sick from eating certain foods and didn't know what it was about until later, for example. And gluten was early for me as well. But there's a lot of things in life that I work with kids and adults. And so we're all like that, but I believe kids are more highly sensitive because they are newer to the world and they're still, I believe kids come from God, come from the spirit world, whatever your belief system is, but they're here and they haven't built up their defenses yet of how we do as an adult. We can turn some things off. So that's one thing, is that they're still developing. So they're more sensitive to EMS, but also other energies, because when I look at the world as frequencies. Because frequencies, whether it's homeopathics or flower essences or just frequencies in general, that tends to work better for the more sensitive type of person. So frequency-wise, we are energetic beings. So I fell in love when I started reading about, I'm going to go around in circles, I think, for a minute, but when I first learned about quantum physics, that just really fascinated me and called to me. So as I delved deeper and then learned about other more ancient healing processes where we have energy bodies that emit from our physical body, we have the etheric, the mental, emotional, spiritual bodies, and those are another reason why more sensitive people are more sensitive to EMFs because they're more sensitive to everything. So as a child, for example, who hasn't built up the defenses, they are more sensitive to negative words, to other people's anger. Like when my son was younger, it took me a while to figure out, but he'd get all anxious, and then I realized he was pulling it from me. It was because I was anxious and he was anxious. So that's one example. But as energy beings, that with frequencies emanating from us, when we walk by other people, we pick up their frequencies. And when you go into a big room with a lot of people, some people might be angry, some people might have negative thoughts in their mind, and you can pick up those frequencies. So if you can get bogged down, just like you can get bogged down with toxins on the physical level, like mold and EMFs and, mold and heavy metals and that kind of thing, you can get bogged down in your energy frequencies, your energy bodies with other things. And if you are toxic in those bodies, then you're going to be more sensitive to EMFs. And because children are more open to those things, they tend, when I work with children, for example, I work on that level first, making sure they have some tools to clear those energies around them so that we can really see are they picking up other people's stuff, or is it really their own physical problems that they're having? Does that make sense?
It does. So you're starting from another direction or another framework compared to some other practitioners that would go urine testing, blood testing, and let's look at the physical body. You say you're working on the energy aspect of things first. So what does that entail? For example, if you see a kid that maybe has a hard time in school, is always very agitated. I know these days it's really an epidemic level of ADD, ADHD level, and I know some parents listening to this are kind of fearful of going down the medical route because they're put on pills that I've seen even my adult friends being put on pills and they just became bland, almost no emotion. So I'm not completely against these things, maybe for emergency situations, short-term use, but at the same time, I know a lot of parents are kind of lost about what they can do about kids that are very problematic. So are you seeing these cases of kids that just won't calm down, won't sleep, won't listen, won't pay attention?
Yeah, it's twofold. EMFs are just important as your energy bodies because they go hand in hand. So I look at it, I basically look at everything in this world at this point as either a positive frequency or a negative frequency. And, whether you're talking about food, trauma, emotions, exercise, water, everything can be looked at as, your tap water has more negative frequencies, for example, and water that comes down through the stream from a mountain has the highest frequency, right? And there's a lot of range in between. And so the more we can remove the negative, which would be a lot of the man-made EMFs, and add the positive, like a big one that I know you talk about a lot is being in nature, for example, to counter that. So we do twofold. We give the parents and the kids tools to clear the energy bodies at the same time as they're removing other negative influences in their home. Could be, a new sofa they just brought into the house, for example, that's full of toxins, and then turning off the Wi-Fi router. Ultimately, the most positive would be wiring all your wireless devices so that you have less exposure. So did that answer your question?
Sure. And I'm wondering about everyday strategies that we can use to calm ourselves down. Or are there specific things that you do? I know that a lot of practitioners these days talk about the importance of the vagus nerve, calming down the nervous system. It's a big problem for me, as I was saying before the interview. So I usually, I'm someone who is very easily addicted to caffeine, who has a very easy time going, exercising, lifting heavy things. But the opposite, the parasympathetic nervous system is a hard one for me to master. Even at 37 years old, I still have a lot to learn on the topic to manage myself and calm down, like be very good at calming down. So is there anything that you share with parents that are specific techniques that can be used on a daily basis, for example?
Yeah, and some of them I'm sure they've heard of, or you might have heard of, like being in nature, for example, just anything in nature. But breathing techniques are really good with kids. The important part for kids, like the most common one that people have heard of is the 4 square breath, where you take 4 breaths in, hold 4 breaths out. And that might be a little difficult for some kids. So instead, it's more about breathing the correct way and making sure you inhale through your nose and exhale for a longer count than you inhale. Because when you exhale for a longer count, you help calm your nervous system down. So that would be one example. But the thing with kids and even adults too, some adults are walking around breathing incorrectly. You're supposed to be breathing with your belly, right? You take a deep breath and your belly goes out so that your lungs can expand. So making sure that children do that. My son, I realized, was not doing that at a young age, so I had to train him to breathe through his belly, and then also mouth breathing. If you have a child that's always breathing through their mouth, that stimulates their nervous system more too. So making sure that, especially at night when they're sleeping, you can, if they are mouth breathers, you can work with a dentist to do taping and some other things, but just putting a piece of tape on their mouth, especially when they're a little bit older, you don't want them to swallow it or anything like that while they're sleeping. And just observing them during the day and reminding them to close their mouth to kind of train them. So just little extra things like that for kids to give them tools, long-term tools, into adulthood. Let's see. Music is a big thing. Humming can really stimulate your vagus nerve, which is a very important nerve in your nervous system that affects all different parts of your body, your lungs, your digestive system, your heart. So anything you can do for the vagus nerve is really important. And humming, kids love to do that. Dancing, and when you do sound and movement together, then it gets even more, it's even stronger result. So just fooling around in the kitchen while you're cooking as a mom, dancing around, singing with your kids, having fun like that. Those are simple things that you can do every day that the child wouldn't even know you're trying to do something on purpose. Something that I teach, one of the tools that I teach that is a little bit different is something called cutting the cord. So I thought I'd explain that one. So when we are, like I explained earlier, we have our energy bodies. And so we could be walking through the grocery store, you're passing all these people in the lane with your cart, or whether the child is in the classroom with some other high energy children, those energies stay attached to the child, especially some children are innately better at letting go of that. But most of us, because of this world and because of EMFs, I think the man-made EMFs, I think we are less able to do that these days. And so we need to have tools to purposely disconnect us from other people so that we can stay more balanced in our own energy bodies. So cutting the cords, when you are around other people, there's an energy cord. Just think of it as like an umbilical cord. You're being attached to everybody that you've been around. You might have looked and smiled at someone at the grocery store. You might have talked to the cashier, for example, and all those cords could potentially be attached to you or your child if your child's with you. And so a lot of this is about intention, because we're talking about layers of our bodies that are not physical, so we can use our mind and intention for a lot of this. But just with the child, pretend you have a pair of scissors in your hand and you're just going to turn around in circles and say, we're going to cut all the cords, and we're going to send them all off. I like to send them up to the heart of God. If you're at the ocean, it's a fun thing to do, and you just send them out into the ocean, but you're sending all those cords back to the people so that you don't have their energies, because you might have their negative feelings or negative thoughts in your energy fields that is affecting you on a physical level.
I like that intention, and I must say, yeah, that's something I used to be more EMF sensitive, but I'm personally sometimes unable to tell how I'm feeling, except when I slow down and really it can take me 2-3 minutes to realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm anxious. And my wife always laughs because I think these things come to her a little bit more naturally. But for me, sometimes I just become so in action that I numb myself from feeling what is going on, because of course there's this imperative for me to do the work and to be a good father, or do the dishes. Okay, there's a task at hand, but I forget my own exhaustion, or my own feelings and my own stress levels. So I think this is a brilliant way to just cut yourself from everything that has also happened during your day, for example. So that's a good strategy right there. You also mentioned to me during our email exchanges that you use muscle testing. I know that some parents might be familiar with it, some not so much. Why don't we talk about that? Because I think it's a great tool. I don't know how much we can teach through an online class about it, but you tell me really. So what is muscle testing, and how can it help people figure out what might be going on with them, with their kids, or really with anyone?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's real important to me as I work with people that ultimately they are able to tap into their own body and have their own, mama instincts, for example, of their child. That is a real thing. And if you set everything else aside, you can really tap in and see what's going on. So muscle testing, most people might recognize it by, putting out an arm and somebody pushing down on the arm. A lot of chiropractors use it, and called applied kinesiology. Kinesiology is another word for muscle testing. But I have taken a lot of muscle testing classes, and I originally learned it from my mom, who became a kinesiologist at one point. And have used it on myself and with my clients for a long time. But there's other versions, like you can use your fingers. So let me just use the finger, since we can see that on the screen pretty easily. So the thing with muscle testing is you have to ask yes or no questions, because you can only get a yes or a no, right? You can't ask a complicated question. So one way people muscle test is you ask a yes, like my name is Sharon, and it's holding strong. So that would be my yes. My name is Frank, and that would be a no. So that's just one example of, there's different ways you can use your fingers. You can do a lean test while you're standing up. And I do have a muscle testing course on my website, just so you know.
Great.
But you can ask, like if your child has a stomach ache, for example, you don't know whether that stomach ache is anxiety, if it is of something they ate, if it's they haven't pooped that day, it could be all sorts of things. You can use muscle testing to hold your child's hand and then ask, or they can sit in your lap while you're doing this, and then just ask the questions. Is it because they're constipated? Yes or no? Is it because they have they ate something bad, yes or no? Is it from anxiety? So you can use it, and that's just one example of many. You can use it to pick which shampoo would be the best shampoo when you're in the store. You can use it for all sorts of things. And even, TV shows. Is this TV show the best TV show my child should watch? Things like, just anything that's a yes or no. That's an immediate answer. Some people start asking me, well, can I ask what career I should go into and all those questions? But if you start asking way far in the future, it's not going to work, because so much in the future can change in the meantime.
Yeah, and I did play around a little bit with the leaning version. You kind of stand upright and you lean, forward. Forward is yes, give me a yes, and you tend to lean forward, give me a no. And I must say, experimenting with it over the last, I guess the last 2 years, I've gotten a little bit better. And sometimes it's kind of easy to second guess yourself, but in the end, it's kind of a fun game to play about. You can tell lies, and you're gonna see it tends to go to the no, and it's kind of a mind bender for me. But in the end, what really convinced me about muscle testing, I must say, is the fact that certain practitioners, I saw Dr. Stephanie McCarter, who's an environmental medicine doctor in South Carolina, and one of the first things we did together is, of course, she looked at my body, what is happening. We took the urine test and the blood test, but also on top of all the modalities that are, let's say, more physical, she also did a long series of muscle testing, which is part of the A.R.T. Developed by Dr. Klinghardt. So that's another version or a framework. And she said, look, it's not like the muscle testing can find everything, but the same thing can be said about urine or blood. It just gives you a snapshot, and the combination of muscle testing, which is a sort of I see it as a sort of intuitive medicine almost. It is basically what works best. So she was able to uncover specific issues on certain patients because of muscle testing, and it made me go, my God, yeah, this has a clinical application, and it doesn't mean it's to be replacing everything in your own judgment, but I think it can, I don't know, it can support your judgment,
It's
or
an
sometimes
adjunct.
adjunct. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very powerful. This is great. And what about? I know that a lot of parents that have sensitive kids also have kids that have a lot of food triggers. Is that something that you address if the kids ate something wrong and they feel triggered by it? Or are there certain techniques specifically when it comes to food?
Yeah, that's a big thing with the kids these days because of all, part of it's because of EMS, part of it's from more medicines in this world being used, the toxins. We just live in a different world than what the one I grew up in. So food becomes, when I was younger, I actually used food. My family used food to heal the family, but that is too basic. Now it has to be food and EMFs and other things as well. But food, I'm actually about to publish a book about how to do gluten-free the right way. And that is because food is so important. Most of us are now sensitive to gluten. Some people say 100% of us are sensitive to gluten, but I think it depends on what else is going on in the body and what else you're exposed to in your environment. But there's some food, gluten, dairy, soy are the top triggers. For example, corn is another one. And so working with parents to figure out, muscle testing can be part of that. And so we can get it to a certain point, for example, and then when we have to get even deeper in, like they might be able to eat cheese after a while or a dairy product after a while. So the parent might bring in 3 cheeses that they found the highest quality that they could find in their area or at their store. And we muscle test those to see if one of those would work. So it's a matter of looking at the health history plus the muscle testing plus some other stuff. So it's very important.
I'm wondering if we can address how screen time fits into your work, because it just seems like certain kids are able to handle some screen time, but for some others, it can be a big trigger. I remember a conversation I had years ago with Dr. Victoria Dunkley, who is the author of a book called Reset Your Child's Brain. She told me that certain kids can barely handle any screen time when they're in a certain state. Have you found this to be the case, that, playing on an iPad or handing phones to the kids just is some kids are just intolerant to this type of stimuli?
Yeah, I mean, it's really bad. It's addictive. It creates dopamine in the brain. So that, it's just so many different things, both the social media part and the technology part of holding a device while the wireless technology is connecting. It's just so detrimental, again, to your energy fields, but it affects and then there's multiple things to say on that, because the kids are holding it by their gut, and that's they're developing their reproductive systems at that point as a child, to their gut, everything, and it just damages so much on a physical level. But yes, and let me give you an example, because my son, we kept the devices away as long as possible as our son was growing up. He's 17 now. And we homeschooled for 6 years, so that was more helpful, because if they're in the school system and everybody else has a device, it's very hard to hold back on devices. So you have to think about those kind of things. It's helpful if you think about it when your kids are younger, if that's something you can do. But he wasn't able to have a device until he was in middle school age, and it wasn't a device that connected to cell towers. It only had music on it and games, for example, and it wasn't until high school that he had it. But even when he was younger, that was one of his punishments. If it was something that he needed to be punished, we'd take the device away from him. Usually because he was on it too much was why we needed to punish him. But when he instinctually knew. He'd come back to me at the end of the week and said, I'm so glad you took that away from me. I just feel better. So he, even as a younger child, could tell that that was different. So that's how much it's affecting them, and they don't even realize. I mean, it's affecting us as adults, so we don't even realize. You know, if we were totally device free for a week, there was a lot, it would be a lot of things in our health and our mental well-being, everything that would just clear up from that alone.
100%. I can say I'm guilty of this. I was having lunch and I played a little bit my video game, and I felt like, wait a minute, I'm getting riled up about a situation in a video game. That's so embarrassing. And I have this interview with Sharon Harmon. I'll be all, my heartbeat is higher. I don't like this, so I'll take a break. It can impact us in many ways, and I must say, I literally was born in '87 with a Nintendo, controller in my hands. So for me, it's part of, I don't know, the culture, and I do have a love for video gaming, but I recognize that I've severely overdone it in my teen years, for example. So for my son, unfortunately for him, or maybe fortunately so, he doesn't have the same rules. And I do see a big change in behavior if he spends more than 30 to 45 minutes in front of a TV. There's just something, it becomes zombified. And when I say, Elliot, it's time to turn off the TV. Oh, and he's all angry about it, or he'll throw a tantrum. He's 6.5 at this point. But even at this age, I think he knows that his behavior can become erratic because of the TV. And if we frame it that way and we explain, look, yes, it can be entertaining, but if we overdo these things, it can be frustrating, or it can keep us in a certain way where you don't feel good. So framing it for your kids, and just, I think that's the same thing with cell phones. Like with teenagers, if he's a teenager, I don't think I'm gonna open his door to his room and take his phone away before bed. Don't do this. It's not going to work. Yeah, I'm gonna create this separation with my kids.
I think it's how you set the rule. Like we have no rule. We have rules that no cell phone at the dining. When we're eating as a family, no cell phones.
Exactly.
When you go to bed, the cell phone has to stay on the island in the kitchen, which is on the opposite end of the house of where the bedrooms are. So we originally had a rule of no devices in the bedroom. So that one kind of got under the radar at this point. But it's still the no cell phone in the room when you're sleeping is a huge rule for me, especially because I know, I have meters. I know how bad it is. And then the other thing is the wireless earbuds that the kids are wearing. Those are so bad for the brain and causing all these emotional stuff that we're talking about, right? Because it's, especially if kids have braces and there's metal in their mouth and those things are there, you're just creating an antenna for all that. So setting the rules early on, and then as a parent, it is hard to stick to them because we're on our devices too, and you have to model, it's a whole package together that you just have to think it through, talk about it with your spouse, and really set some ground rules and stick to it.
I agree 100%. I'm glad you said that. I think setting boundaries as parents, boundaries for ourselves first. If daddy is playing video games and getting, aggravated at some silly situation and feeling angry about it, the kid will not only see me, but pick up this energy and say, oh, well, it's okay to play video games and get angry. Or, it makes no sense for me to tell him, now don't do what I just did, right? We have to lead by example. So I think, controlling ourselves and not being on devices while we're having dinner, if that's a family rule, you have to follow it to the letter as much as you can, except if it's an emergency. But we really need to set the example for our kids. So I'm glad you said that. And I'm wondering, how can people find more about you? I know you mentioned you have a course on applied kinesiology or muscle testing. Please mention that. And how can people learn more from your work? Because I'm sure that a lot of parents are looking for help with their sensitive kids.
Well, thanks for asking. Well, my website's easy. It's my name, SharonHarmon.com. And on there, I have lots of free content too. I've been blogging for over 10 years, so lots of blog articles on EMFs and energy stuff and everything in between. And let's see here. I have some freebies on there too. Like one of them is 9 positive frequencies you can incorporate daily. So that would be a good thing for parents and anybody to have. And I have the muscle testing course. I'm about to come out with my gluten-free book. And the most exciting one is I'm coming out with my second course, which is all about energy sensitive kids. So I'm going to be teaching the tools and how to reduce the EMFs and some of the tools to clear your energy fields, and then also talk about other toxins and things in the house you should look at to help calm your energy sensitive kids.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad that you are addressing EMFs. I think that unfortunately we're still in a place and time in society where a lot of people who think holistically tend to forget EMFs. It's just an afterthought. I think it's clearly an important part of your interventions with parents, and I'm sure that a lot of people can gain a lot of insights from following your website. So again, SharonHarmon.com, and all the links that you mentioned, including the freebies and everything else, will be mentioned under the interview. So thanks again, Sharon, for being
here
you
so much
as a speaker in EMF Hazards. Well, I really had a blast, and I'm gonna use some of these techniques to calm myself down and won't play any video game today anymore.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick.
I really hope that you liked this presentation. If you want to take action on what you just heard, you'll find links to everything that was mentioned by our guest speaker right underneath this interview. If you love the summit and want to own the recordings in audio, video, and written form for all of these 2025 interviews, make sure to click the buttons on this page to get the 2025 EMF pack. This EMF pack is heavily discounted during the summit launch and for a very limited time. Remember that every purchase supports my work as an independent citizen journalist, as well as the nonprofit partners that are associated with this summit. Thank you for your attention and support, and I'll see you in the next presentation.